as I understand it in my conversations with Speaker Batchelder, there will not be any House sessions until November. My hope is, and I'm going to be working with Representative Thompson, that we can get 50 votes in the House soon after we come back after the election, which I think is the Tuesday, maybe after the election. I think we can do that, and I know Speaker Batchelder has charged myself, but really both of us with getting with our members and explaining why this bill is appropriate. And that's why I think this committee process is important to vet the issue.
And have you talked with the Senate at all? How do you expect this
I spoke with Senator Faber about 2 hours ago and explained to him that we were having this press conference and what our process was, and he wished me well.
Do you foresee any repercussions as far as federal funding should Common Core be repealed in Ohio? Will there be any reduction of funds because of that?
Yeah, I don't, but I think Representative Thompson is more steeped on that than I am.
Well, that's a question that has been asked of me from the beginning of the introduction of my bill. The answer, I would say, is unclear right now. Half of the money allocated under Race to the Top has already been spent. The other portion is in the process of being spent. We don't have a clear answer from LSC, particularly on that one, but we're continuing to trying to get to an answer. One of the things that's difficult for the federal government is if they come and try to reclaim the money on this, they're going to be admitting in effect what they've said was not true from the beginning, which was that it wasn't really a federal program. And it really has been from its inception. And so there's kind of an uncomfortable feeling there. I'm not sure the president's going to want to pull money out of Ohio, given the extreme interest that both parties have in the state of Ohio. So I'm thinking the likelihood probably is that we will be able to retain what we have received. If we need to make financial adjustments, I think we will. But again, with the desire to not continue down a path that is not working, I think we'll have to adjust accordingly. There have been some other financial initiatives. I know there's always money rolling out of Washington. Even though they're broke, they manage to find money all the time to do some other things, particularly when it's dictating to the states what they're going to do. So that's something that is a key component, a core component of why there is a concern about the Race to the Top program and the impact that it's had. And you recall, we're just, No Child Left Behind was the last great federal program that was going to make education wonderful. This is the latest one, and before that you had Goals 2000, and you've had a series of other ones. I'd refer you to the Weekly Standard. I think it was the last week's issue, where there's a nice piece on all the federal reforms that have come down the pike in the last several years, none of which has really made a difference. I don't think a lot of people would say that the federal government's entry into education has been a positive, and that goes back to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act back in 1965. So we want state control, we want local input, we want the citizens of Ohio to be reassured that they have standards that have been tested and proven. And again, I look forward to working with Representative Huffman, and I'm very grateful to the Speaker and to the House leadership for providing us the opportunity to do what is past due, because I would like to have been able to do this earlier, but we understand it's a process, and we're looking forward to a good solution.
So in the interim, there will be reverting to the state standards that existed prior to this. And then the other piece I want to ask about is, it sounds as if the legislature will then write the standards, and what's the role of the state board at that point if you write the standards?
My understanding is that the standards, we have standards that have already been written, tested, and proven. The state board does have the role of ultimately approving those, but we'd like to have a process whereby the House can bless that in some way, shape, or form. That's one of the things that we're exploring with LSC. It has been done in the past. Standards have been approved by resolution or some other kind of action by the legislature, and I think that would probably provide public reassurance that in fact their elected officials are aware of and are supportive of the process.
I know that you said that the education changes all the time, but how do you address the concerns that it seems like Ohio is always in a perpetual implementation phase, that reforms are proposed, approved by the legislature, and then canceled before they go into effect? It happened with the Strickland reforms just a few years ago before they had a chance to take it.
Yeah, I think it's the nature of the political makeup of the state.
So then why bother doing standards in the first place? Why not?
I'm not going to not do my job because somebody else did it poorly before, in my mind. I mean, I don't just say, well, I think that's bad, but I'm not going to do anything about it, because if I change it, somebody else may make it bad again. That would be legislative malpractice, I think. But, you know, in Massachusetts, you know, the Democrats do what they want. In Wyoming, Republicans do what they want. In Hawaii, in the Senate, there's 24 Democrats and 1 Republican. So, you know, in Ohio, we've had obviously a governor, Governor Strickland, who had a vastly different idea about education, about spending, about taxes. And I was there for that entire 4 years, and in my mind, that was a very tough time for Ohio. This governor has a completely different idea, and this speaker has a completely different idea of, and as I should say, also Senator Faber does, of than what Governor Strickland thinks. You know, and not to get too far off the subject, but you know, I started working on the school funding formula about a year and a half ago, and I kind of boiled it down to about 4 or 5 elements that everybody could understand. And when I sat down with some people who've been around here for 20 years, and I said, well, you know, I got all these people saying it's unconstitutional, the legislature won't do anything about it, and on and on and on. What it really boils down to is a lot of the uncertainty in school funding benefits a lot of the people who are involved. They don't want to solve the problem. And that may be, but for the guys who are in here on a temporary basis like me and Representative Thompson, us term-limited legislators, we're here to try to solve the problem. Now, sure, there's someone coming in behind me, somebody smarter than me, actually, probably, Bob Cupp. And but the point is, we're not going to simply sit by idly and say, well, I know it's bad, but I'm not going to do anything about it. And this sort of under the radar, hey, we're getting some money to help with standards and testing 4 years ago, now being implemented, and everybody's saying, oh my, is really, I think, what Representative Thompson is talking about. So we can't just watch as the ship smashes into the rocks.
So in that essence, in that sense, it's not a coincidence that this is an election year. You're hearing this out in your districts, or
every year is an election year somewhere, and even if it's not an even-numbered year, some mayors or somebody are running who maybe running for Congress next year or something. You know, as chairman of the campaign committee, there's always some electoral issue for somebody out there. This, frankly, from my perspective, in terms of my involvement, came up in the last 6 to 8 weeks because it's when I personally have had time to deal with it. You know, you remember some of my greatest hits, internet cafes and severance tax and a variety of other items. And when this issue came about, or this summer, I called Representative Thompson and I said, hey, what are some of the things we can do to resolve this? And we talked about 237. We talked about what we did in 497. And as we sort of went back and forth jointly, while he was on vacation part of the time, sorry about that, Andy.
I wasn't sorry.
You know, we sort of said, let's just start clean and just get down, do the hard work of getting everybody in the room, have the conversation, and to the extent that that makes people feel uncomfortable, well, that's okay. You know, I'm a lawyer. I guess I do that sometimes just by being around people. So.
You both talk about concerns about local control. Why do you believe that the superintendents and the school boards both support Common Core if local control is such a major problem?
Well, I'll comment. Did you say the state superintendent and the state school board, or local board? The
Superintendents Association,
okay.
BASA, and the.
Well, here's what I found out about state associations, and in particular the Superintendents Association. Sometimes the association has an official stance, and sometimes superintendents around the state think something completely different. And the superintendents, in particular, I think, are folks who, here's what the policy is, and we need to support that, and then they take the representative into their office after the meeting and say, here's what I really think. And so and certainly folks within the process of who have to run entities and run them smoothly and fund them, they have a different perspective than the customers and the people who are sending their kids. You find that out with school choice. You find that out with all sorts of things that superintendents may want that parents don't. and obviously superintendents have different ideas among them. So that doesn't surprise me at all, I don't think.
And I guess the thing that I would share too is, yeah, it's kind of like maybe some of these things are more Columbus driven than they are down in the grassroots. I recognize that they speak to their superintendents, they speak to their school board members, but I remember early on I spoke with them and I said, be careful on this issue because you may find out that your folks think differently than you do. And I also said that to both the Ohio Federation of Teachers and the Ohio Education Association. I think that they have learned. If you notice at the national level, all of a sudden you're hearing a much different tune that's being sung. And you're even hearing politically a different tune that's being sung now on the other side of the aisle and by those associations now that we're not so sure that we love this as much as we told you were supposed to love it. And I think that, and it's because of members are singing from a different songbook than they are. They're not happy about it. Their association may not be where they are, but I think there's what you, as I alluded to earlier, there's a pressure not to speak up and say negative things about Common Core because of the financial aspects that folks were concerned about. I mean, you never want to be in a position where you can't say no because of the money. You want to be able to do the right thing based on your conscience and your principle. And I think what teachers are saying is, for a lot of them, you're taking the joy out of teaching. It's not what I thought I was getting into when I started. I want to have time for classrooms. I want to be able to treat kids as individuals. I don't want to be drilling them constantly so that they can get the test result that some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. wants and is looking over our shoulder. So, you know, when we talk about different education policies and how much things are changing, think how much the federal government changes things when they mandate certain things, whether they're mandating standards or whether they're mandating testing through No Child Left Behind. This hasn't been a partisan issue. There have been lots of bad ideas on both sides of the aisle. So we're term limited, folks. We've got a certain amount of time that we can do to make an impact and positive impact and make a difference. And as Representative Huffman said, if we see something we think is inappropriate or wrong or not working, we're going to do our best to try to change that.